In the initial moments, a girl found herself in a state of unconsciousness, shivering in the extreme cold. Her body felt frozen, and amidst the chill, an unsettling sound caught her attention. Observing a boy, her thoughts pondered upon the beauty of his eyes, yet confusion arose as she wondered why tears streamed down his face, carrying an unexpected warmth. Following that, we observed the girl lying in bed, having awakened and subsequently seated. Upon seeing her, the maids present exclaim in recognition of her royal status. The girl, filled with wonder, contemplates the situation, questioning the references to Her Highness and realizing the possibility that they might be referring to her. In a state of confusion, she grapples with the unknown circumstances, attempting to piece together her identity and surroundings. A maid administers medicine to the girl, who expresses her displeasure at the bitterness of the potion. The maid advises her, emphasizing the importance of taking the medicine for a swift recovery, addressing her as Your Highness. The girl complies, acknowledging the instruction with a simple affirmation. The girl, after enduring bitter medicine and engaging in conversations, discovers that she has somehow entered the fictional world of a romance novel named Lady and the Beast. This novel is a fantasy romance loosely based on Beauty and the Beast, featuring characters like Blake, the cursed monster crown prince, and Richard, who vie for the affection of the heroine Diana. The girl finds herself in the body of Anthea, Diana's half-sister, who becomes a princess by marrying Crown Prince Blake. Unfortunately, Anthea, upon witnessing Blake's cursed face, takes a drastic action on their wedding day. This event leads to Blake's despair, considering himself a monster, closing off from the world and ultimately facing a tragically young demise while failing to win Diana's heart. Anthea, contemplating her situation, reflects on the novel's narrative where she was supposed to drown in the lake and Blake would retrieve her frozen corpse. However, since her soul entered Anthea's body, that fate did not befall her. Recalling a boy from the previous night who seemed to be Blake, she notes his sincere grief. Surprisingly, he hasn't visited her in the 5 days since she woke up, leading her to believe that he might be emotionally affected by her absence. Observing Anthea standing up from the bed, the maid, inquiring, asks if she wishes to go somewhere. Anthea expresses her desire to visit the Crown Prince. The maid, with respect, cautions Anthea about the recent shock experienced by the Crown Prince and suggests waiting a few more days before announcing her departure. Smiling, Anthea reassures the maid not to worry and instructs her to lead the way. The maid acknowledges with a simple, "Yes, Your Highness." The maid guides Anthea to meet Blake. Anthea, in her thoughts, expresses her determination not to leave Blake. She reveals her fondness for Blake in the novel Lady and the Beast and her disbelief when Diana chose Richard over him. Anthea sees an opportunity to rewrite Blake's dark childhood and is unwilling to give up on it. Additionally, she notes that Anthea, in the story, has nowhere else to go, being the daughter of Count Valentia and his first wife, with her mother passing away during childbirth. The Count remarried, and Diana, Anthea's half-sister, was born from this union. Anthea faced harsh treatment from the Count and the new Countess, who, fully aware of the Crown Prince's cursed fate, sent her to marry him. Anthea's decision to throw herself into the icy water was not solely due to Blake's monstrous face, but rather the despair of being abandoned by her family. Even if the current Anthea were to leave, she recognizes she has no place to call home. Moreover, she is determined not to abandon Blake to wallow in despair. Entering Blake's room, Anthea encounters his traumatized state as he wraps himself in a blanket, urging her not to come near. Despite his plea, Anthea pauses, addressing him as Your Highness. Blake, distressed about his disfigurement, emphatically warns her to stay away, fearing he will scare her. Anthea, realizing his fear, sighs and approaches, pulling the blanket he had wrapped around himself. Blake is shocked, exclaiming, "Ah, no." Anthea and Blake then continue to gaze at each other. Subsequently, Blake begins to conceal his face with a pillow, prompting Anthea to express her indignation at having her blanket taken away. Shocked, she contemplates the situation, thinking about the potential misunderstandings that might arise. Anthea reflects on the contrast between the current Blake and the dark, peerless character depicted in the novel, emphasizing the unexpected portrayal of Blake as more akin to a white, fluffy bunny rabbit than the master of seduction. Approaching Blake, Anthea takes a seat and declares that she has something to tell him. Subsequently, she gently removes the mask covering Blake's face, causing him to be shocked and protest against her looking. However, Anthea, holding Blake's face in her hands, insists on seeing, expressing that he is beautiful. Blake, innocently surprised, questions her statement. Anthea reaffirms her admiration, expressing that she has never seen anyone as beautiful as him. She continues to gaze at Blake affectionately, while he remains clueless about her feelings. Contemplating Blake, Anthea reflects on the truth to comfort him. Despite the black whorls of his family curse on the left side of his face, she acknowledges the beauty in his features: huge eyes, regal nose, tender lips, and a graceful chin, all harmonizing angelically. Anthea believes it's an undeniably beautiful face. She envisions that once Blake meets Diana, he will be liberated from his curse. Anthea anticipates that once the curse mark is erased, Blake will be hailed as the most handsome man on the continent. Even in the present, she finds his face remarkably pretty. Blake hesitates, expressing his belief that Anthea hates him. Anthea reassures him, making it clear that she doesn't harbor any hatred. Despite Blake's continued uncertainty, Anthea explicitly states that her fall into the lake was accidental, not a deliberate suicide attempt. However, in her thoughts, Anthea acknowledges that the original Anthea did commit suicide due to the shock of her betrothed's appearance. Yet, as the current Anthea, she has chosen to portray it as an accident, emphasizing that she personally would never have jumped into the lake because of Blake's face. Concerned, Blake questions Anthea's truthfulness. Anthea affirms, expressing gratitude for Blake saving her from drowning and stating that she came to thank him for saving her life. Blake, seeking reassurance, asks if she is truly thankful, to which Anthea responds affirmatively, emphasizing how could she not be thankful for him saving her life. Hearing this, Blake becomes teary and sniffs, confessing his earlier belief that Anthea had killed herself because of him. Anthea, with a smile, reassures him, stating that she wouldn't do that as she has everything to live for, especially having married him. Blake, still emotional, admits he feared she might hate him for saving her life, explaining his hesitation to see her. Reflecting on the past 5 days, Anthea assumes Blake must have been distressed while she was unconscious. However, when she hugs Blake and reassures him, expressing her genuine liking for him, an emotional Blake reciprocates, admitting that he likes her too. In her thoughts, Anthea playfully dismisses Blake as a big fat liar, perhaps in good-natured teasing. In the novel Lady and the Beast, Blake harbors affection for the main character, Diana. Upon learning of Blake's feelings, the Emperor requests the Count of Valencia to arrange a marriage between Blake and Diana. However, Count Valencia, unwilling to send his beloved Diana to marry the cursed crown prince, instead sends Anthea in her place. This decision reflects a choice for a little white lie over the potentially harsh reality. After Anthea suggests sharing a bed, Blake, shocked, silently crawls back away from her, blushing. In her thoughts, Anthea playfully questions why he appears so alarmed, feeling as if her suggestion was misconstrued as something risque. The Count of Valencia's household possessed the power of light, crucial for freeing Blake from his curse. Diana, the chosen successor with the stronger ability, harnessed the Valencia family's power to liberate Blake. Anthea, also a daughter of Valencia, had the power but not as potent as Diana's. Prince Blake's curse, extending beyond a mere birthmark, inflicted excruciating pain, intensifying in cold weather. Despite this, he endured agonizing pain by jumping into the freezing lake in winter to save Anthea. Anthea reassures Blake, emphasizing that as a married couple, it's natural for them to sleep together. Despite her reassurance, Blake, embarrassed, stammers, attempting to hide his face in a pillow. In her thoughts, Anthea humorously contrasts the current Blake's embarrassed demeanor with the wild masculinity of the original Prince Blake, playfully likening him to a red-eyed bunny rabbit and questioning if he will transform into a sexy beast in 10 years. Determined to care for Blake, Anthea contemplates the situation, acknowledging the need to attend to the ailing prince. In a decisive move, she takes a pillow from Blake, prompting a surprised reaction. Holding his hands, Anthea declares that, as a married couple, they should sleep together every night. Blake, taken aback, seeks clarification on this newfound arrangement. Anthea, undeterred, questions if he has any objections, to which Blake, somewhat startled, denies. However, he questions Anthea's willingness, inquiring if she is truly okay with sharing a bed with him. Anthea reassures him, expressing genuine affection and asserting that she really likes him. Blake, processing this revelation, blushes, touched by Anthea's admission. Blake takes hold of Anthea's hand, prompting her to question if he feels comfortable with the gesture. In her thoughts, Anthea wonders if the power of light within her could alleviate Blake's curse. Observing no immediate change, she reflects on the novel's premise that holding hands with Diana would ease Blake's pain. Disheartened, Anthea expresses a desire to relieve Blake's suffering, but acknowledges that her powers might not be strong enough since entering this universe. As Anthea begins to leave, Blake reacts with surprise. Swiftly, he hugs her tightly, attempting to prevent her departure. Blake expresses his appreciation for the warmth of Anthea's hand, squeezing it, and earnestly implores her not to leave him. Touched by Blake's teary voice, Anthea assures him in response to his concern. Blake, seeking confirmation, questions if she is truly not leaving. Anthea reaffirms her commitment, stating that she only came down from the bed to pick up the blanket. Blake, blushing, reacts with surprise. Amused by his reaction, Anthea wonders why he would tremble after giving her a back hug. Anthea, addressing Blake, suggests that if he doesn't want to sleep with her, she is open to that. However, Blake fumbles, assuring her that it's not the case. He expresses his concern, wanting to confirm if she is genuinely willing to sleep with someone he perceives as a monster. In response to his use of the word monster, Anthea, angered, raises her voice and emphatically denies that Blake is a monster, pleading with him not to use that term. Startled by her reaction, Blake is taken aback. Blake, still hesitant, stammers in response to Anthea's reassurance. Anthea, gently holding Blake's hands, reiterates her belief in his beauty and insists he is far from being a monster. Witnessing Blake becoming teary, she comforts him and goes on to predict that his curse will be broken someday, specifically when he turns 18. Blake, surprised, questions if his curse will indeed be broken at that age. Anthea reaffirms her certainty and encourages him to be strong and ignore the opinions of others until that happy day arrives. While making a pinky promise, Anthea assures Blake that he will never be defeated by the Zarathilian curse. Playfully, she says, "Cross my heart and hope to die." However, this phrase triggers an emotional reaction in Blake, who angrily snatches his hand away, fervently urging her never to say those words again. Trembling with emotion, Blake expresses his fear of Anthea dying, emphasizing that she must live even if he doesn't. Calming him down, Anthea gently holds his hand, reassures him that neither of them will die, and encourages him not to worry. Blake, overcome with tears, starts to cry. Anthea, gently wiping away his tears, playfully calls him a crybaby. In response, Blake, still in tears, vehemently denies being a crybaby. Anthea teasingly insists otherwise, pointing out his wet handkerchief as evidence. The back-and-forth banter continues until Anthea, hugging Blake, reassures him that everything will be okay. She pats him gently, and eventually both of them drift off to sleep. The next morning, Anthea wakes up, and upon seeing Blake, wonders if he held her hand all night. Finding him cute, she gently pats his forehead. Blake opens his eyes, smiles, and when Anthea questions the reason for his happiness, he responds that it's because he's lying by her side. Touched by his words, Anthea can feel the sincerity in his sentiment. Observing Blake's happiness, Anthea wishes she could always make him smile. Over the next few days spent together, she notices that Blake rarely leaves his room unless necessary, preferring to eat and read there. Anthea also finds his peculiar eating habits amusing, consuming an abundance of greens, specifically salads, for 3 consecutive days. She wonders if the cook believes they're rabbits due to the consistent green diet. Sitting down to eat, Anthea nervously notices the nearly identical menu each day, finding the soup too salty. Curious, she asks Blake about his food preferences, and he claims to like everything, including meat and fish. Anthea, puzzled by the constant servings of wilted salad and leftovers, wonders why Blake, despite being cursed, doesn't seem to have any dietary restrictions. Feeling bad for Blake, Anthea speculates that the constant unappetizing meals might be due to a lack of respect for the crown prince from the staff. Despite their royal titles, she reflects on their youth and perceived powerlessness. Anthea hints at the current Lord Chamberlain, Brown, the son of Marcus Hamill, as possibly responsible for the disrespectful treatment. When Blake questions her about the food, Anthea hesitates but reassures him that the food is fine, deciding not to burden him with her concerns. Anthea instructs the maid, Melissa, to convey a message to the Lord Chamberlain. After the meal, she requests Melissa to ask the Lord Chamberlain to come to her room, as there is something she needs to discuss with him. Melissa bows in acknowledgement, responding with a respectful, "Yes, Your Royal Highness." With a smile, Anthea offers roasted mushrooms to Blake, encouraging him to try them. Blake hesitates, expressing his disinterest in mushrooms. Undeterred, Anthea insists he must eat them for their health benefits. Blake reluctantly takes a bite, and Anthea instructs him not to just wash it down with water, but to chew before swallowing. Blake, feeling proud, gulps down the mushroom, thinking, "I ate it." Fondling Anthea's hand, Blake expresses how her warmth makes him feel better. Anthea, finding him cute, lovingly observes him and then encourages Blake to eat the remaining mushrooms. In that moment, Anthea starts to wonder if her hand's comforting effect on Blake might imply that she possesses some power of light. Upon the announcement of Lord Chamberlain Brown's arrival, Anthea instructs to show him in. Brown enters and respectfully asks how he may be of service. Anthea reflects on him being the eldest son of Marcus Hamill and notes that he didn't visit her during her bedridden days. She contemplates that, as the son of a marquess, he might consider himself superior to her, the child bride of the cursed prince. Anthea expresses her dissatisfaction with the quality of the crown prince's meals to Lord Chamberlain Brown. Brown, seemingly dismissive, comments on expecting more urgent matters. Anthea, angered, emphasizes that the crown prince is the light of the empire, yet the meals served are not even fit for livestock, considering it urgent business. Brown sneers at Anthea, explaining that the budget allocated for maintaining the crown prince's household is not sufficient due to constraints from his imperial majesty. He defends the need to scrimp and save under these circumstances. Anthea contemplated the situation, convinced that Brown was a blatant liar. While acknowledging that the crown prince's budget might not allow for extravagances, she was certain it could cover the basic necessity of meat. In a dramatic turn, she played along with Brown's explanation, assuring him that she understood. Brown, visibly relieved, expressed his concern about her youthful understanding and praised her sensibility. Anthea, maintaining her act, unexpectedly declared the release of Brown from his duties, leaving him startled. Furious at Anthea's unexpected response, Lord Brown Hamill stammered, demanding clarification. However, Anthea maintained her composure and promptly ordered Lord Edmund to take Brown to the dungeon, accusing him of embezzlement from the imperial coffers. Brown, bewildered and terrified, protested the accusation, questioning Anthea's understanding of the term. Unmoved, Anthea asserted that what he had done perfectly fit the definition of embezzlement, causing Brown to tremble and shiver in fear. In a fit of rage, Lord Brown Hamill vehemently protested to Lord Edmund, demanding to be released. He asserted his status as the heir to the Marquis Hamill and criticized Anthea, the young girl married to the cursed monster, for playing princess. Amidst his screams, Brown vowed that she would pay for her actions. Unfazed, Anthea calmly instructed Lord Edmund to add contempt of the crown prince and princess to Brown's list of crimes. Lord Edmund, following Anthea's orders, sternly nodded in agreement, intensifying Brown's distress. Despite Brown's continued protests, Edmund's stern gaze silenced him, leaving him shaken and frozen in fear. After the expulsion of the Lord Chamberlain, the court of the crown prince descended into chaos. Contrary to yielding to the confusion, Anthea took a bold step forward. In her decisive action, Anthea, channeling the events of Lady and the Beast, terminated the employment of nearly all the servants in the palace staff. Drawing inspiration from the novel, where Blake faces betrayal from most of his staff after losing his position as the crown prince, Anthea preemptively removed anyone who might betray Blake in the future. Contemplating the emptiness of the palace, Anthea pondered the situation. Just then, Melissa, expressing concern, inquired if it was acceptable to dismiss all the staff, emphasizing that they were chosen by the emperor himself. Anthea empathized with Melissa's evident worry. Anthea, grinning, assured Melissa that everything was fine and not to worry. Melissa, complying, asked about the dinner schedule. Anthea then remembered dismissing the cooks, but reassured Melissa that she would be handling the cooking herself. Shocked, Melissa questioned Anthea's cooking abilities, to which Anthea confidently affirmed that she could indeed cook. Smiling, Anthea informed Melissa about an interesting discovery she made while wandering through the castle. She invited Melissa to follow her, expressing excitement about what she found. Arriving at the destination, Melissa, puzzled about how the princess got there, was surprised to see various food items. Anthea, with enthusiasm, revealed the items, pointing out doenjang and gochujang, exclaiming in excitement. Melissa, perplexed by the unfamiliar names, questioned Anthea about the sauces. Anthea explained that doenjang and gochujang are condiments from the Orient, known to enhance the flavor of food. Melissa, impressed, asked Anthea if she was perhaps a genius. Anthea, laughing nervously, claimed she had learned about them as a child by reading books, though in her thoughts, she apologized for lying to Melissa. Melissa shared with Anthea that she had heard about the emperor collecting flavors and spices from around the world to please his empress. Anthea, fueled by frustration, couldn't believe that the kitchen had access to such wonderful ingredients but only served them salad greens. Excitedly, Anthea rolled up her sleeves, expressing her enthusiasm to start cooking. She initiated the cooking process with Melissa. After a while, Anthea proudly declared that everything was done. Melissa, thinking about Anthea, admired her culinary skills, considering her a genius in the kitchen. Anthea, relieved, suggested calling the prince to dinner. Blake gawks at the food, marveling at the spread. Anthea beams as she explains that it's Oriental cuisine inspired by something she read in a book. She reveals that all the ingredients were in the pantry, so she decided to give it a try. Blake, impressed, asks if Anthea made all of this herself, to which she proudly confirms. Blake expresses his amazement with wow. Blake, intrigued by the unfamiliar dishes, stares at the food. Anthea, noticing his curiosity, asks how he plans to eat it. She realizes that it might be Blake's first experience with Korean food. Anthea agrees that Oriental cuisine is quite different from their usual fare and mentions her recent discovery of Asian food. Anthea introduces the Korean-style meatballs to Blake, playfully calling them dongrang tang because they're round and cute just like him. Blake, surprised by the compliment, questions if Anthea finds him cute. Anthea reassures him, comparing him to a little bunny rabbit and encouraging him to try the meatballs. Blake happily eats, expressing that it's a whole new world of flavor. Anthea, pleased by Blake's reaction, asks if he likes them, and Blake responds affirmatively, finding the experience cute as well. Anthea introduces the stew called doenjang shige to Blake, encouraging him to try it and mentioning its peculiar taste. She assures him that if he doesn't like it, he doesn't have to eat it. Curious, Blake agrees to try it. Anthea wonders if he'll enjoy it, considering it's likely a taste he hasn't experienced before. To her delight, Blake tastes it and exclaims that it's good, declaring it the yummiest thing he's had in his entire life. Anthea expresses her intention to make the stew often for Blake, who excitedly responds with yippee. Happy at Blake's joy, Anthea reflects on the feeling of being with him, thinking that it's akin to having a little son rather than a husband, but she's perfectly content with it. Anthea plans to stay by Blake's side, ensuring his happiness until he reaches adulthood and fulfills the condition to break his curse by falling in love with Diana. However, Anthea acknowledges her limitations in directly lifting the curse and believes her role is to protect Blake until he meets Diana. She reflects on the predetermined nature of Blake's curse, inherited long before her presence in Anthea's body. Despite her inability to alter the curse, Anthea hopes to prevent Emperor Fenston's future death, focusing on events after Blake's wedding ceremony. She decides to patiently wait for the Emperor's return from the Valley of Chaos. Anthea discovers that Blake genuinely loves Korean food and decides to make it authentically. Realizing she needs a traditional Korean cauldron, she plans to draw a picture of it and consult a goldsmith for its creation. Anthea also intends to request the construction of a furnace in the palace kitchen to support her cooking endeavors. She contemplates the ideal location for placing the cauldron, considering factors such as convenience and functionality in the palace. Caught measuring the space for the cauldron, Anthea is surprised by a red-eyed boy who approaches her. Startled, she turns to face him. The boy extends his hand, apologizing for unintentionally frightening her. Upon seeing the boy with dark eyebrows, a sculpted jawline, a scar on the neck, and fiery red eyes resembling a wild animal, Anthea instinctively recognizes him as the hero of Lady and the Beast, Richard Carsill. Richard greeted Anthea after a long time, and as Anthea thought about it, she realized that Richard was the second son of the Duke of Carsill, the Emperor's younger brother. Since Blake was destined for a tragic young death, the Duke and his sons were next in line to the throne. Richard, whose mother was a slave, was excluded from the line of succession, but he was ambitious. He eliminated his rivals one by one and eventually ascended to the throne. In the novel's conclusion, Richard uses Diana to eliminate Blake. Anthea is determined not to let that happen. She won't allow Emperor Fenston to die a sudden death, and Blake will not be stripped of his crown. Anthea asked Richard about the reason for his visit, and he mentioned the commotion caused by her actions from the first day of her marriage. Anthea reflected on how, in the process, she had eliminated all the spies Richard had planted in the palace, anticipating that it must have unsettled him. Anthea inquired about Richard's intentions, and he pointed out that her actions, particularly sending Lord Chamberlain Brown to the dungeon and dismissing the court staff chosen by the Emperor, were hasty and unlike her usual self. Richard emphasized that the Hamel family held the confidence and trust of the Emperor, and it was rash to treat his eldest son in such a manner. He also expressed disapproval of dismissing the court staff personally selected by the Emperor. Anthea, seething at the thought of Richard, considered the court staff as spies from him and his family. Despite her frustration, she maintained a smile and justified her actions, stating that they couldn't afford untrustworthy individuals by their side. Richard, in response, argued for tolerance when dealing with inferiors, emphasizing the importance of securing loyalty through understanding rather than abrupt dismissal. Anthea, unyielding, asserted that it was not his concern and requested him to leave if he had nothing further to add. Richard, addressing Anthea, asked if she was still upset, suggesting that it might be related to his rejection of her love. Anthea, confused by the statement, couldn't comprehend what he was talking about. Richard continued, acknowledging Anthea's feelings and expressing regret that he couldn't reciprocate due to his status as a bastard son, highlighting the potential defiance it would pose to the Emperor. Anthea, contemplating Richard's behavior, thought about how he manipulated and discarded his lovers. She considered him conniving. Richard, referring to Anthea as sweet and kind, mentioned her understanding of his delicate predicament, stating, "I know you like me." Hearing this, Anthea was consumed by rage. Anthea, with a smile, addressed Sir Richard, accusing him of being delusional and denying any affection towards him. Richard, taken by surprise, wondered about her statement. Anthea continued, expressing her dissatisfaction with Richard's rudeness, stating that he showed disrespect to the crown princess and committed a grave discourtesy against the imperial throne. Frightened, Richard attempted to appease Anthea by reaching for her hand and questioning if she was still upset. However, Blake intervened, firmly grabbing Richard's hand. Anthea, startled by Blake's sudden action, addressed him with respect. In anger, Blake instructed Richard to stop, emphasizing Anthea's displeasure. Richard, feeling apprehensive, tried to explain their relationship as childhood friends, but Blake corrected him, insisting on referring to Anthea as the crown princess. Bowing apologetically, Richard acknowledged his mistake and promised to be more careful. Blake sternly warned him that any future discourtesy toward the princess would not be forgiven and instructed him to leave, prompting Richard to depart. Observing Richard's departure, Anthea found herself caught by Blake, who lovingly advised her not to look in that direction. Confused, Anthea questioned him, and Blake pleaded with her not to gaze at other men. Anthea assured him not to worry and clarified that Richard wasn't a man but a dog, expressing her frustration at his audacity to think she liked him. Blake, taken aback, questioned her, and Anthea continued to vent her annoyance at Richard's behavior. Stammering, Blake inquired whether Anthea liked Richard, considering his popularity. Anthea strongly expressed her dislike for smooth-talking rakes like Richard and declared her preference for cute guys resembling bunny rabbits. Surprised, Blake blushed happily, rubbing Anthea's hand against his cheek, which touched her deeply. With joy in her heart, Anthea contemplated the dissipation of her anger. She curiously asked Blake about the type of women he liked, to which he responded with an immediate and genuine declaration that he liked Anthea. Despite Anthea's attempt to clarify her question, Blake emphatically expressed that Anthea was his type and swiftly hugged her, stating that all he needed was her. Anthea reciprocated his feelings, expressing her mutual affection for him. After checking the water temperature, Anthea was satisfied, exclaiming that it was just the way she liked it. She then turned to Blake, who was engrossed in reading a book, and proposed a surprising idea. With a smile, she informed him that starting today she would assist him in taking a bath. Blake, taken aback, blinked in surprise, his eyes wide, and began to tremble at the unexpected proposition. Despite Blake's embarrassed attempt to escape, Anthea caught him and informed him that she had already drawn a bath for him. However, Blake, shuddering at the thought, expressed concern about Anthea getting infected with his curse. Anthea reassured him, dismissing the possibility of such a fate and insisting that it wouldn't lead to unhappiness. The rumor circulated that anyone who saw or touched the cursed citadels would suffer misfortune or be cursed. Traditionally, the cursed successor faced exile to the southern islands upon the appearance of these marks, forfeiting their title. Despite the expectation, Blake, following the footsteps of the cursed ancestors, retained his position in the imperial palace. Emperor Thenston's deep affection for his son led to this deviation from the norm, allowing Blake to remain within the castle despite the ominous marks. Assuring Blake, Anthea expressed that she wasn't unhappy despite the false rumors circulating. When Blake questioned the possibility that the rumors might be true, Anthea reassured him, emphasizing that she had already seen his face and held his hand without any adverse effects. Blake, troubled by the size of the sigils on his body, deemed himself a monster. Anthea, addressing him as Prince Blake, attempted to console him, but he shouted in distress and withdrew his hand. Blake crouched on the floor, tearfully expressing his fear that Anthea would hate him if she saw the marks on his body. Anthea, addressing him as Your Highness, realized that the rumors were merely an excuse, and Blake hesitated to show her the sigils on his body, despite her having seen those on his face and hands. Anthea acknowledged her misconception and the sensitivity surrounding the hidden marks. Anthea approached Blake, urging him to look at her. Despite his hesitation, she reassured him, emphasizing that he was not a monster. Tenderly placing her hand on Blake's face, she conveyed that touching him brought her happiness since the day they got married. Blake, blushing, asked if she was truly happy, and Anthea affirmed, expressing her joy at having him as her husband. In response, Blake embraced Anthea warmly. Blake expressed his happiness to Anthea, acknowledging that marrying her brought him great joy. Anthea, in turn, requested him not to refer to himself as a monster. Blake agreed, and Anthea proposed taking a bath together. However, Blake, startled, shook his head in rejection, leaving Anthea confused, as she had just assured him that she didn't mind the marks on his body. Blake, with a trembling voice, mumbled to Anthea that he was ashamed to show himself. Anthea, laughing, expressed surprise that he was embarrassed. Blake blushed and accused her of making fun of him, to which Anthea covered her mouth with her hands, insisting that she found him cute rather than mocking him, causing Blake to believe she was teasing him once again. Anthea teased Blake about his shyness, questioning how he endured having a maid attend to him during baths before. Blake admitted it wasn't a problem because it wasn't Anthea. Anthea playfully accused him of discrimination, and Blake quickly denied it, assuring her it wasn't true. Anthea then instructed Blake to step into the bathtub, and he nodded in agreement. Hesitatingly, Blake began to remove his clothes, pausing to caution Anthea not to be frightened. Anthea reminded him of his promise not to make such comments, insisting he remember not to fear her rejection after seeing his body. Anthea warned Blake that if he spoke negatively again, she would genuinely be upset. Tearfully, Blake pleaded with Anthea not to leave him, and in response, Anthea remained silent. Anthea contemplated the inevitable, her departure from Blake's side before he reached the age of 18. Knowing that only the novel's heroine Diana could break the curse, Anthea acknowledged her role in the story. to safeguard Blake during his childhood and step back when the time was deemed right. Anthea, with a tightened grip on her emotions, assured Blake that leaving him was not her intention. Internally grappling with the necessity of deception, she maintained a smile, referring to Blake affectionately as her little bunny rabbit husband. Blake sought reassurance, and Anthea, wiping away his tears, promised that this is her home now. Encouragingly, she suggested they proceed with their bath to prevent the water from turning cold. Anthea observed the curse marks on Blake's left side as he undressed, a visual reminder of the ominous fate tied to his lineage. On the other side, a frustrated Richard expressed his dismay. All the spies strategically placed in the Crown Prince's household were ousted by Anthea. She terminated the employment of chief courtiers and servants, leaving Richard's father, the Duke of Carcel, and his half-brother frank irate that their schemes were thwarted by a mere 10-year-old girl. The maid who had assisted Blake in his bath played a pivotal role as an informant, and her dismissal was regrettable in the eyes of Richard. However, Richard still possessed a valuable card up his sleeve. The Crown Princess Anthea, who used to adore him, was a knave simpleton who didn't bother to conceal her feelings. Taking advantage of the loneliness and despair of a little child had been remarkably easy. Richard believed that if he could manipulate the Crown Princess as his puppet, she would be more effective than 10 other spies combined. This motive led him to venture into the wing of the palace where the Crown Prince resides. Richard contemplated, realizing that things didn't unfold according to his plan. The Crown Prince had undergone a transformation, not just in strength, but also on a fundamental level. Anthea's influence seemed to have an impact on that mysterious aspect of the monster. Suddenly, Anthea appeared highly desirable to Richard, and a newfound desire for her stirred within him. Anthea, upon observing Blake's body, thought determinedly that she must not display any surprise or dread. She proceeded to grasp Blake's hand, questioning him about his slim physique, and directed him to enter the water, expressing concern about him catching a cold. Blake simply agreed with a response of okay. While bathing Blake, Anthea noticed the curse marks covering half of his small frame and felt troubled. Recognizing that Blake is only 8 years old, she recalled from the novel that he would endure excruciating pain as the marks spread in the deep layers of his flesh. Anthea couldn't help but empathize with the poor boy, acknowledging the suffering he must have endured. Anthea's touch on Blake's body causes him to blush. He expresses concern about her getting infected, to which Anthea responds angrily, reassuring him that it won't happen. Blake falls silent in response to her stern words. Anthea, while rubbing Blake's body, playfully sings a song about his chubby tummy. Blake reacts defensively, denying having a chubby tummy. Anthea continues to tease him, and Blake eventually admits that it's sticking out a bit because he just ate. Blake, peeved, declares he won't have dinner anymore. Anthea playfully suggests that without eating he won't grow, and she'll always be taller than him. Blake, worried, contemplates what to do, but then sits glumly. Anthea gigbles, revealing it was just a joke. She reassures him, encouraging him to eat lots of food so he can grow big and strong. Blake beams, promising to grow bigger and stronger than Anthea, leading to a lighthearted exchange between the two. Then Anthea receives a present and a letter of apology from Richard. She reads the letter, expressing regret for the previous day's events. Anthea, skeptical and sensing something fishy, wonders if Richard is attempting to manipulate her into becoming one of his spies. She reflects on her previous interactions with him, feeling that she made her stance clear, yet he persists in his delusions. Anthea contemplates how to handle the situation. Anthea requests Melissa to send back both the present and the letter to Richard. Melissa suggests keeping the letter, but Anthea insists on returning it to avoid any confusion about her intentions. Anthea reflects on her hope that Richard will abandon his questionable plans. Hans approaches Anthea, informing her of more gifts sent by Sir Richard. Anthea, increasingly frustrated, insists on returning all the presents to him. Despite repeated attempts to convey the message, Hans finds it challenging to break through Anthea's resolve. Anthea remains resolute in rejecting any gifts from Sir Richard, determined to make her stance clear. Hans bows respectfully to Anthea, greeting her with a good morning and mentioning Sir Richard. Anthea, already familiar with the topic, instructs Hans not to bother informing her about Richard's gifts and to send them back. However, Hans hesitates, revealing that this time Richard has sent a particularly valuable treasure, a ring set with mermaid's breath. Anthea, surprised by the unexpected nature of the gift. Anthea, aware of the significance of mermaid's breath, contemplates the rarity and power it holds. In the novel, Richard had given this precious stone to Diana, but now he has sent it to Anthea. Suspicious of his intentions, she believes Richard might be attempting to lure her into becoming his spy. Despite her curiosity about the beautiful jewel, she decides not to inspect it, determined not to fall into any potential traps set by Richard. Anthea, expressing her firm stance, instructs Hans not to present the mermaid's breath ring to her. She makes it clear that she wouldn't accept even a mine full of mana stones from Richard and urges him to convey the message that he should cease his efforts, both for his sake and hers.